Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. All right, welcome to episode 28 of the Near Memo. David Mim, Mike Blumenthal, and me, Greg Sterling, talking about the important news items and developments of the week in local, social, and commerce. And we totally won't be talking about the UN climate change report today because it's just too depressing. So we're not going to talk about it. But we will be talking about other things that are interesting that happened this week, some of which we wrote about and some of which we have yet to write about. And the first one of those was in the most recent newsletter about Google's impact on local and regional food delivery services and how Google's picking winners and losers in that space. And Mike, you wanted to talk about that.
I did. It was in Fast Company. It was titled "Local Food Delivery Companies Say Google Devastated Their Business." It's a story of independent food delivery services that existed long before Grubhub and DoorDash, which were growing 5 to 20% a year, and now they're year on year down 50, 60%. And they lay a large part of that to Google. And they recap in this article the history of Google first testing delivery in the local panel the way they do that is they partner with one or two of the big guys and they pull in the links. Nobody can change them, right? The links are there. And then the big guys like what they see. So then they go out and do some quote unquote growth hacking and add all fake websites for all the rest of the restaurants that aren't in there. They add all those links in, creating this dynamic. And then ultimately Google changes it so that businesses can at least delete those links themselves ultimately. But it creates a dynamic which these small local delivery businesses are, basically devastated. And I know in your newsletter, you noted that Google claimed that it helped consumers. This is very googly, though. They test this with a very large customer and often only make these features available to the very large people like DoorDash and Grubhub, often excluding small. And, it creates a reality. And then these Grubhub and DoorDash can lose $1 gazillion. It doesn't matter because they're venture funded forever, not forever, but for a very long time. And it just creates a dynamic in which the local business landscape is devastated. And it's because this is how Google rolls. They're basically oblivious to their impact.
One of the things they want in partners is scale, right?
Exactly.
Sometimes they cobble together scale by working with different regional companies, but one of the primary things they look for is the kind of scale that mirrors their capabilities. And by definition, these local and regional companies don't have it.
Correct. And they often will test that without any user interface, which makes it hard on the businesses upon which they're testing it. So essentially, everybody's involved in this living experiment, whether you're a restaurant that wants to be or not. And then, of course, DoorDash and Grubhub leveraged it unethically as well.
I was just going to say, often the companies with the highest scale have the lowest ethical bar. So it's really an unfortunate situation for, in this case, small businesses of both tech and offline varieties caught in the middle. So,
right, and it's not because Google is trying to deliver a benefit to the customer. They are, but they're also trying to do it in a way that's easy for them, which means at scale, right? So they take the easy route, and it has all these unintended consequences.
What's interesting here, I think there were a couple of things that were interesting beyond what you've already said. One is that Google may be relatively benign in its intent here. They're not trying to put people out of business. They're trying to deliver a good experience to the consumer, and then because of their modus operandi, this is how they do it. And as you say, there are these unintended consequences. But then that's the second point, which is this seems to be a pretty clear kind of antitrust scenario in the sense that even though Google is doing this ostensibly for the benefit of the consumer, deliver a better experience for everybody, what's happening is that they are driving people out of business at the local level, which eliminates competition, which will ultimately harm the consumer if you have only 3 or 4 giant food delivery companies, national companies, that can then extort all kinds of fees and so on and so forth, notwithstanding the municipal efforts to push back on that. And so it's a pretty clear case, if assuming everything Fast Company says is true, between Google doing something and justifying it on the basis of better experience for the consumer and its impact and its ultimately negative impact on the market and then in turn in the consumer. It's just a nice sort of capsule that really reflects all these things together, in one kind of case study.
Yeah, and I think, Mike, there isn't currently a vector of antitrust law that that talks about harm to small businesses, but Mike and I have mentioned this for years in our old Street Fight columns, even just that is not a direct consumer harm, but it does, as you just said, lead to indirect consumer harm in the future. And right now, there really isn't a way to pursue that legally, as far as I know. So.
Well, I mean, I think some of those arguments can be taken into account, but I think that's a minority kind of that's not the same. That's the thrust is consumer harm,
right.
And this is a kind of delayed consumer harm scenario, which I think increasingly people will recognize. Mm-hmm. I think that there's a shift going on.
There's the other side of it too, which is just the amazing impact that Google has on society in this regard. And you see it with their stupid business naming policy, where they allow businesses to rename themselves sort of willy-nilly to gain ranking value. And you see all these businesses renaming themselves as San Diego personal injury lawyer. And now there's 10 San Diego personal injury lawyers. It's
best Denver signs near me.
It's just a weird outcome. Yes, best Denver. That's right. I mean, it's just so bizarre. It just speaks to their position in society, and this impact that they do have is very significant.
But in fairness, and I mean, I don't want to speak to Google's lax sort of enforcement of quasi-spam rules, but I mean, the Yellow Pages, that was going on in the analog world, right? AAA towing, AAA plumbing, right? There are people that did that. It's just easier to do it now.
Yes, it is easier. We were told the other day that we shouldn't report it unless there's at least 4 modifiers. 2 or 3 they're going to overlook.
What? Is that an official position?
SEO tip of the year right there.
No.
Wow.
That's something I shouldn't be saying in public.
Oh, but you have now. You have now, Mike.
Because it was so fucking stupid.
Cat's out of the bag.
Yeah, really a dumb one.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.